excited. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on a new trend. Yeah, no, apparently Monday was just I'm not going to say a one and done because I'm not going to accept that, but one and not another for a while. But that's the way it goes. Anyway, this is a topic, this is a subject that I've struggled with this honestly since I was a little girl. Um, at a very young age, I remember hiding food. Just, I didn't think much of it at the time, other than thinking that, you're a kid and you think you're being sneaky, but that's that's the problem. That's a problem. Look, we all celebrate with food to a degree. So that means we're emotionally eating. Everybody. You go to a birthday party, what do? You eat. You go to friend's house for dinner, you go for barbecues, you go for picnics, you go out to dinner. We celebrate with food. And you know what? There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's very natural and human, and I think eating together and sharing food is one of the best ways to really get to know people. But if food becomes your primary coping mechanism, obviously that's a problem. That's a big problem, but it is fixable. And I got to be honest, I was sitting here a few minutes before the video and I was like, man, I know this stuff. I thought I had this conquered. I really did. And I started kind of getting down on myself. Then I was like, well, wait a minute. Let's review the past couple of years and all the craziness that's been going on, not just in the world, but in my life. I mean, my dad almost died. My mom did die. Then my dad almost died again. And that was just from the beginning of COVID until this past September. It's been a hell of a wild ride. So realistically speaking, it's not a huge surprise that once again I had turned to my old friend, food. You know what? Food ain't your friend. It's just food. Anyway, if this is something that you've struggled with like I have, it can be really hard to know sometimes, especially if you're in an emotional state. Y'all, we're coming up on coming up on 1 year since I lost my mom. And of course, that's very emotional. I mean, how the hell could it not be? And it's natural. It's not a surprise that I've fallen back into old habits. So let's talk about this. By the way, this information is from the incredible Dr. Michaela Sarno. I did an online class of hers about emotional eating, and it really made a huge difference for me. But, things have been freaking hard, and I've fallen not entirely back into old habits, but I have fallen a lot back into old habits. And again, I went way off track, but if this is something that you've struggled with since you were young, it's hard to tell what the difference is between a physical hunger and an emotional hunger. So let's get that out of the way first. A physical hunger is a legitimate need for food. It's an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach. Sorry. It has no palate. If you're really hungry, you'll eat whatever's put in front of you. You won't care. If you're truly physically hungry, it has a gradual onset. Emotional eaters, you'll know this one. Physical hunger doesn't need to be stuffed. It just doesn't. And it doesn't leave you with a sense of guilt or shame because you're simply fueling your body. Emotional hunger, on the other hand, is when you're using food to fill an emotional need and not just an empty stomach. You're trying to fill a different kind of empty. It's never going to work. For the record, it ain't going to work. Trust me on this. Emotional eating has a palate. What do you crave? What do you crave when you're under stress? There's your emotional eating palate. I like sweets. I love sweets, and sugary, fatty foods, they provide an instant rush. You can kind of get addicted to that. Emotional eating is focused on specific tastes and textures. For me, honestly, thank goodness there's no one in town that makes one that frankly, and this is gonna, I don't know, probably sounds snobby, but no one in town makes a cinnamon roll that meets my standards. But I'm grateful for that, because a beautifully made cinnamon roll is one of the most incredible things, in my opinion. That is my biggest weakness. But That's if I had my druthers every time I was stressed, that's what I would have. But when you give in to that kind of hunger, it leaves you feeling guilty and full of shame. You're sitting there thinking, man, what the hell is wrong with me? Well, you just got some stuff you got to work through. There's nothing wrong with you. Everybody's got shit they got to work through. If you're still not sure how to tell the difference, are you eating because you're stressed? Do you eat when you're not hungry or when you're already full? Do you turn to food to comfort yourself? Doesn't that sound sad? But I've done it. I did it for a long damn time. It is what it is. Do you regularly eat until you're overstuffed? I used to, all the time. I didn't realize for a long time what I was doing, which of course didn't help the situation any, but I didn't. Probably because I was very careful to avoid taking a look at myself and my life. But I used to feel really powerless and out of control around food, and that's so sad. But I have a really good friend, one of my best friends, her sister, who is also a good friend of mine. The sister struggled horribly with drugs most of her adult life. And gosh, it was probably about 25 years ago. And she'd gotten out of rehab. She'd been clean for a couple of months. And we were talking about addictions. And we were talking about food addiction and her drug addiction. And she said, yeah, but food's the addiction you can't avoid. She said, I can choose to avoid drugs. You can't choose not to eat. Now, I can choose what to eat. I can choose how much to eat, but she's correct. People who have these problems, it's hard because you can't just, I can't just avoid it. I got to eat. But you need to understand that food can't make you feel safe. Food can't make you feel comfortable. Think about how you feel after you binge. You know how it is. You don't like yourself at that moment at all. You're just sitting there beating yourself up, and what does that do? Probably going to lead to another binge. Just gotta figure this stuff out. It's all changeable, but you've got to put in the work, and part of the work is figuring out what method is gonna work for you, what clicks for you. You can hear the same thing 100 times, but then someone says it for the 101st time, and you're like, now I get it. That clicks with me. That I can work with. So hopefully you'll find something here. But why do we do this? It's a way to try to cope with stress. Actually, it's a way to try to avoid uncomfortable feelings. Food is a temporary distraction. And again, it just leads to more guilt and shame. So you need to fix it. You can fix it. That's the good news. Until things got super crazy, I had a good handle on this. And again, it's really only normal and natural that when everything in my life honestly felt like it was falling apart, of course I would slip a little bit into my old habits. But it's fixable. So first you need to identify the emotion that's driving the behavior, and you need to remember your feelings and emotions, they're neither good nor bad. They just are what they are. Some obviously are much more pleasant than others, but even our uncomfortable emotions, they serve a purpose. So you need to understand that. You need to understand that how you judge your feelings and your emotions, that's the problem. It's not the feeling or the emotion itself, it's how you choose to respond to it. Shame is very common. Shame is an incredibly powerful emotion, and it drives most addictions. And that is according to Dr. Michaela, who is an addiction specialist. But people who eat, that's the emotion. I sounded like a sheep there. That's the emotion that we try to stuff the most. But you need to identify the emotion that's driving. So you're at work and somebody does something and sets you off, and you just want to dig into the candy jar. Not what are you pissed about, but what's the emotion behind it? What is it in you that responded in anger to what that other person said or did? Now, no, that's not excusing the other person for whatever they said or did. But you need to look at yourself and figure out, okay, this made me feel like it reminds me of when I was a little kid, and whatever it is for you. I'm not getting into that deep with you guys because you don't need to know my personal business that well. But you need to figure out that emotion that's driving you before you eat, not after, because we all know if you've done this, it's the guilt and the shame after. But you need to identify what that emotion is, and you need to identify when do you first remember feeling that. And this is not going to be easy. It's just not. But it works. So what's the source of that emotion? You know what? It's probably really, really, really old. It's probably something that happened. And a lot of times it can be something that on the surface is relatively minor, but the way it impacted you as a child. I mean, little kids don't have a lot of logic, you know? One of my mentors, she heard her parents talking about money. They didn't have a lot of money. She heard them really fighting, but they were concerned, and they were kind of fretting about money one night when she was little. And her parents never put it off on their children that, oh my gosh, we're so poor and we're so broke. But she heard this conversation behind closed doors. And when she got older, she was a very hardcore driven workaholic because she had processed that moment, that really innocent, most of us have been there moment. And she processed it as, I don't have value unless I'm making a lot of money. Is that a logical leap? No, not really. But when you're a child, you know, shit happens. You just have to accept that. But you've got to find that old emotion, because if you don't, it's going to continue to drive the behavior. So if you really want to address the behavior, you got to do the work. Sorry. But here's the biggie. If you don't listen to anything else that I just said, but you're struggling with this, here's the big one. This is a good way to start if the rest of it's overwhelming. And I get that. If you're not used to doing this kind of stuff, it's really difficult. Just reschedule. So whatever happens, whatever gets you sets you off. And now you want to reach for the cheesecake or the cinnamon roll or whatever it is. And you've identified the underlying emotion that's driving that response. Then what you do is, okay, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes. I'm going to give myself an hour. However long, make it at least 30 or 45 minutes, but I'm going to wait 2 hours. Then I'll have the cinnamon roll. Then I'll have I don't know, whatever you like to have. And when that time passes, if you still want to eat whatever it is, then eat it. And don't feel guilty, because by delaying it, you're no longer responding to stimulus. You are actually, I should say, you're not responding at all if you're emotionally eating, you're reacting. You have not put in the thought to respond. This allows you to step back. Take that emotional step back, and it allows you to just calm down. It's not about deprivation. This empowers you. You're the one who's making the choice to wait. And again, if you waited an hour and you still want to have your cinnamon roll, then by all means, enjoy the hell out of it, because frankly, you've earned it. You've shown that you're not a slave to your emotions, that you are in control, because really at the end of the day, you are. And so am I. And then we're talking about this because, I'm struggling with it a little bit right now. But I'm aware of it. And I know I need to go back. I already know. I'm lucky. I already know the emotion that drives my behavior. I just need to keep a closer eye on the things that set me off. And I need to be aware that, yes, I have a lot going on. And yes, with my mom's anniversary coming up, things are hard. And what are you going to do? That's life. As my mom used to say, that's life and we're living it. But I'm going to cry again, so I'm going to go. Hope you guys have a great